The year is 1980. The place is New York City. For 3 weeks, the city has been on edge as the trial of the century has just begun. 5 made men from the Genovese crime family, along with several associates, were on trial for various crimes, including murder. But there was one thing the prosecution didn't have, which was a key witness who was willing to testify against them. So they offered her protection, and she accepted, or at least that's what they thought. Because just 2 days into the trial, she was nowhere to be found. Her apartment was ransacked. Her car was abandoned in a nearby neighborhood, and all evidence pointed to the fact that she had vanished without a trace. The FBI immediately jumped into action. Agents fanned out across the city looking for any sign of her, but they came up empty-handed. They checked hospitals, morgues, and even notified the Red Cross. And after 3 long weeks, they had to conclude that she had simply disappeared. It was a devastating blow to the case, one that would undoubtedly result in the suspects walking free. Or so everyone thought, because this is where the story takes a turn. You see, despite being missing, she left behind one very important piece of evidence, a single cryptic voicemail message. It was only 16 seconds long, but it may have just cracked the entire case open. But before we get into what the message said, let's talk about how this woman got mixed up with the mob in the first place. Her name was Corinne. She was a 29-year-old secretary who worked for a company owned by one of the defendants, Mike DeGregorio. At the time, the company was under investigation for ties to the mob, which is why Corinne's boss, Mike, was on trial. Now, despite working at the company for years, Corinne had no idea that Mike was a mobster. In fact, she had no idea that the man sitting right across from her at work was even an organized crime boss. But then one day, the FBI raided the office and arrested him, along with several other people from the company. Corinne was shocked. She had no idea that the man she worked for was a mobster. But when she heard what he and his associates were accused of, she agreed to testify against them. After all, she had nothing to lose. She was just a lowly secretary who worked at the company. What would they even charge her with? But when she went to the prosecutors, they were hesitant to take her offer. You see, while she might not have been a mobster, she wasn't exactly innocent either. While working at the company, she stole $10,000 from her boss, Mike. So when he was arrested, she took the money and hid it in her apartment. So basically, she had every incentive to testify against her boss. She could go down for a lesser crime than what she was originally charged with, and she'd also be able to keep the money she stole. But the prosecutors weren't convinced. They were afraid that she was trying to make a deal with the defense, and that's why they put her through a lie detector test. She passed with flying colors, and the prosecutors agreed to let her off the hook for what she did at the company and for the stolen money. In exchange, she testified against her former boss and the other mobsters. But after making the deal, things started to unravel pretty quickly. Corinne received numerous threatening phone calls, some of which came from people she recognized as part of the crew. So the FBI put her in protective custody and planned to bring her out only when she was needed to testify. But when that day came, she was nowhere to be found. The agents tracked her movements back to her apartment, where they found signs of a struggle. They also found her car abandoned several blocks away from her apartment. But despite having plenty of leads, they were unable to find her. And as I mentioned earlier, she left behind one very cryptic voicemail. When investigators played the message, all they could hear was heavy breathing at first. Then they heard what sounded like hail for several seconds, followed by a loud bang. And then they heard a man's voice say, "Fire," before hanging up. While the message didn't offer much, it did lead to one important detail. The fire hydrant outside Corinne's apartment building had been removed. And after talking to neighbors, investigators learned that somebody had come by earlier that morning and asked where the key was. But that still didn't explain why Corinne was taken or why the fire hydrant was removed. As it turns out, nobody really knows. After searching everywhere, the FBI was forced to admit defeat. The only theory they had was that the mob bought her off, which was never proven. The trial continued without her, and the 5 mobsters were acquitted on all charges. But in the end, Perrin's story didn't end there. After the case was over, the lead prosecutor promised that he'd find her and that he kept his word. He tracked her down to a small town in New Jersey where she'd been living under the Witness Protection Program. She was given a new identity and a new life, one that was far removed from the dangerous world of organized crime. But while she was safe, she couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if she had actually testified. Would the mob have silenced her? Or would justice have been served? We'll never know.